In the heart of a bustling city, nestled among the shadows of towering buildings, a tragic event occurred in 1979 that would haunt a community for decades. A homeless shelter, a sanctuary for the most vulnerable, was consumed by flames one fateful night, leaving behind charred remains and unanswered questions. Among those who vanished that night were a handful of souls, but one disappearance remained particularly painful for a family, a young woman named Maria Rodriguez. For Maria's mother, the years have been an unending nightmare, filled with grief, heartache, and an unwavering hope that one day she would find answers. As the years turned into decades, the memory of that terrible night faded from the collective consciousness of the city. But for Maria's mother, Rosa, the pain never dulled. Each passing year was a reminder of the daughter she lost, a daughter who had dreams of a better life, a life that was cruelly snatched away. She spent countless nights searching for clues, reaching out to the police, desperate for any information that could lead her to her daughter. Yet, with each inquiry, she was met with indifference and skepticism, the case growing cold as the years slipped by. But then, in 2014, something unexpected happened. Something that would reignite the flickering flame of hope in Rosa's heart. During a routine renovation of the old shelter, workers stumbled upon a locked room hidden behind the kitchen. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community and sparked a renewed interest in the long-forgotten case. What lay behind that locked door? Could it hold the key to understanding what happened to Maria that tragic night? In the days that followed, Rosa's world was turned upside down once again. The locked room became a focal point of curiosity, and the media descended upon the story like vultures. What had once been a painful memory was now thrust back into the limelight, forcing Rosa to confront her grief once more. But this time, she was determined to take action. With renewed vigor, she decided to delve into the mystery surrounding the locked room, hoping it could finally provide the answers she had sought for so long. As she began her investigation, Rosa faced a daunting challenge, reconnecting with a system that had long since moved on. The police, who had once dismissed her pleas for help, were now inundated with inquiries about the newly discovered room. Would they take her seriously now? Would they finally listen to the voice of a mother who had endured the unspeakable? The first hurdle came swiftly. When Rosa approached the detective assigned to the case, she was met with skepticism. This room could be nothing more than a storage area, he remarked dismissively, barely glancing at her. We've gone through this before, Rosa. There's likely no evidence of what happened to your daughter. But Rosa refused to be silenced. Her heart raced with the possibility that this locked room could be the break she had been praying for. She began to dig deeper, reaching out to former shelter workers and survivors from that night. What she uncovered was a tale darker than she had ever imagined. Whispers of clandestine activities, of things that went on behind closed doors, began to surface. Could it be that the shelter, once a haven, had masked a much more sinister reality? The further Rosa probed, the more questions emerged. Each new lead was met with a mix of excitement and dread. Was she prepared for the truth that lay ahead? But what Rosa uncovered was not just the story of her daughter. It was a web of deceit that extended far beyond the flames of that night. As the narrative unfolded, Rosa learned of a hidden double life among those she thought she knew. A potential conspiracy, entwined with the very fabric of the shelter itself. The truth was becoming increasingly complex, revealing a dark underbelly that had gone unnoticed for years. As she sought justice for Maria, Rosa found herself navigating a labyrinth of secrets and lies. Each step brought her closer to the truth, but it also placed her in peril. She discovered that confronting the past would not only lead her to the answers she sought, but also to unexpected allies and dangerous adversaries. In her quest for closure, Rosa was not just a mother seeking justice. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. The locked room was more than just a physical space. It was a portal to the past, an opportunity to unearth the truth that had been buried beneath layers of grief and silence. As Rosa pressed forward, she began to understand that the story of her daughter was intertwined with the stories of others. Those who had been silenced, those who had suffered in the shadows of the very place meant to protect them. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the repercussions of that fateful night were far-reaching and would affect the lives of many. Would Rosa find the answers she so desperately sought? Or would the truth be too painful to bear? The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. The ghosts of 1979 were not ready to be forgotten, and Rosa's journey was just beginning. As we join Rosa on this harrowing journey, the question lingers: what really happened behind the closed doors of that fateful night? The truth lies waiting in the ashes, and it is time to uncover what has been hidden for far too long. Rosa's heart raced as she stood before the locked room, the air thick with anticipation and dread. She recalled the stories that had been whispered among the survivors, and the rumors that had spiraled into urban legends over the years. Each tale seemed to echo the same theme. Something sinister had occurred in that shelter, something that had been buried deeper than the ashes of the fire itself. Determined to unravel the mystery, Rosa began reaching out to former residents of the shelter, those who had been there on that tragic night. Many were hesitant to speak, their faces shadowed by the weight of painful memories. But Rosa was relentless, gently coaxing out their stories, piecing together a narrative that had long been obscured by fear. One evening, she met with a man named David, who had been a teenager at the shelter during the fire. His eyes flickered with the light of recollection as he recounted that night. He spoke of screams, flashes of light, and a deep sense of confusion. But then he paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There were whispers about a room," he said, glancing around as if afraid the walls might betray them. "They said it held secrets, things no one was meant to see." Rosa felt a chill run down her spine. The locked room was not just an old storeroom, but potentially a vault of hidden truths. With every conversation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, revealing a picture that was both compelling and terrifying. But her inquiries did not go unnoticed. The authorities, who had long since deemed the case closed, began to take a renewed interest in Rosa's investigation. Some were supportive, but others were defensive, their skepticism evident. They had moved on, convinced that the past should remain buried. One officer even warned her, "Some things are better left alone, ma'am." His tone was kind yet firm, as if trying to shield her from the consequences of uncovering long-hidden truths. But Rosa could not be deterred. The pull to discover what lay behind that locked door outweighed the caution being offered. As days turned into weeks, Rosa began to gather more information about the shelter's past. She learned of financial troubles, allegations of misconduct among staff, and even hints of illicit activities that had taken place behind the scenes. Each revelation painted a more disturbing image, suggesting that the fire may have been no accident at all. Then, late one night, after reviewing a trove of old documents, Rosa stumbled upon a name, one that would change everything. It was a former staff member, known for their charismatic demeanor but rumored to have been involved in questionable dealings. The revelation sent shivers down her spine. The more she uncovered, the more she felt the walls closing in around her. Rosa knew she needed to confront this individual, to uncover their connection to the shelter and the events surrounding the fire. But as she prepared for what would undoubtedly be a tense meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that the closer she got to the truth, the more danger she was inviting into her life. The locked room, the whispers, the hidden name, it all pointed toward a confrontation that loomed on the horizon, one that could shatter the fragile peace she had fought so hard to maintain. Would she be prepared for the truth, no matter how dark it might be? The shadows of the past were closing in, and Rosa was ready to face whatever lay behind that door. As the days passed, the weight of her impending confrontation loomed heavily over Rosa. She spent countless hours piecing together the puzzle, driven by an unyielding desire to expose the truth. Each late-night session revealed more inconsistencies in the former staff member's history, casting doubt on their charismatic facade. Their involvement with the shelter had been deeper than anyone had initially realized, intertwining them with the very fabric of its operations. Rosa learned that this individual had been present on the night of the fire, a fact that sent her heart racing. What role had they played? Was it mere negligence, or was there something far more sinister at hand? The more she uncovered, the more questions arose, fueling her determination to confront them directly. With a mix of trepidation and resolve, Rosa arranged a meeting. The location was a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a place that felt safe yet fraught with tension. As she waited, her mind raced through scenarios of how the conversation might unfold. Would they deny everything? Would they become defensive? Or worse, would they threaten her into silence? When the door swung open, Rosa felt her breath hitch. The former staff member entered, a disarming smile plastered across their face, but their eyes held a flicker of something darker. They approached her table, and the cheerful ambiance of the cafe faded away, replaced by an oppressive silence. "Rosa," they greeted, their voice smooth yet laced with underlying tension. "It's been a long time. What's this about?" Taking a deep breath, Rosa plunged into the conversation, revealing her discoveries about the shelter, the locked room, and the fire. With each word, she watched their expression shift from curiosity to guardedness. The facade began to crack, and for the first time, Rosa sensed the power she held in that moment. But then came the twist. As she pushed for answers, the former staff member leaned in closer, their voice dropping to a whisper. "You should be careful, Rosa. Some doors are meant to stay locked. You might not like what you find." A chill ran down her spine as the implication of their words settled in. Were they issuing a warning or a threat? She could feel the shadows of the past swirling around her, the danger creeping ever closer. The conversation shifted, filled with subtle insinuations and veiled threats, leaving Rosa with a sense of dread. As she left the cafe, the weight of their words echoed in her mind. She realized that she had only scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy, one that reached far beyond her initial suspicions. The locked room, the fire, the hidden name, it was all connected in a way she had yet to fully comprehend. Determined to delve deeper, Rosa knew she needed to gather more evidence before she could confront this individual again. She began to reach out to former residents of the shelter, seeking their stories and experiences. Each interview revealed a tapestry of trauma, secrets, and unspoken fears, reinforcing the idea that the fire was no accident. As she collected more testimonies, a disturbing pattern emerged. Several individuals spoke of strange occurrences leading up to that fateful night, whispers of a plan that had been set in motion long before the flames consumed the building. The more Rosa uncovered, the clearer it became that she was not merely unraveling a single tragedy, but a web of deceit that entangled many. With each new piece of information, Rosa felt the looming confrontation with the former staff member edging closer. The tension was palpable, and she knew that the truth behind the locked room and the shelter's devastating fire was more complex than she could have ever imagined. The shadows were closing in, and the time for reckoning was drawing near. Rosa gathered her notes, the weight of the evidence pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had spoken to nearly a dozen former residents, each echoing the same chilling sentiment. Something had been amiss at the shelter long before the flames took it. Rumors of financial troubles, mysterious visitors, and clandestine meetings filled the air. But the most unsettling stories revolved around one individual, the shelter's manager, who seemed to have a hand in every dark corner of the operation. With renewed determination, Rosa decided to visit the local archives, hoping to unearth more about the shelter's history. As she scoured through dusty newspapers, her heart raced. Articles from the time of the fire revealed a pattern of insurance claims that raised eyebrows among even the most casual observers. It appeared the shelter had undergone several financial inspections just months before the blaze. Rosa felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. Was it possible that the fire had been orchestrated to collect insurance money, leaving lives shattered in its wake? As she pieced together this new puzzle, Rosa found herself in contact with an old journalist who had covered the story extensively. He recalled a fire inspector's testimony that had never made it to the final report, a mention of a locked room at the back of the kitchen, rumored to have contained vital records, and perhaps even evidence of foul play. This revelation sent chills down Rosa's spine. The locked room was more than just a relic of the past. It was a potential treasure trove of information that could shed light on the shelter's darkest secrets. Fueled by this new lead, Rosa returned to the shelter's site. With the locked room now at the forefront of her mind, she sought out any remnants of the structure that remained. As she wandered through the overgrown lot, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air was thick with tension, and she could almost hear the whispers of those who had once sought refuge there. Rosa's heart raced as she spotted a familiar figure in the distance, the former manager she had confronted previously. He was pacing nervously, glancing over his shoulder as if he sensed her presence. Determined not to let this opportunity slip away, she approached him cautiously, her pulse quickening with every step. "Do you remember the locked room?" she asked, her voice steady, though her insides churned with anxiety. He froze for a moment, the color draining from his face. "That was years ago. There's nothing there," he replied. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Rosa pressed on, knowing she was close to uncovering the truth. "People are talking. They remember things that could change everything about what happened that night. Were you involved in any of this?" His eyes darted around, searching for an escape. In that moment, Rosa realized she was teetering on the edge of a revelation that could shatter everything, both the silence of the past and the facade that had kept the truth buried for so long. The air crackled with tension, and Rosa knew she was nearing the moment of confrontation. The locked room held answers, but the real question remained. Would she uncover a truth that would lead to justice, or would the darkness of those tangled secrets consume her? As she prepared for the next steps in her investigation, one thing became abundantly clear. Time was running out, and the truth was not going to reveal itself without a fight. Rosa took a deep breath, steeling herself against the weight of the moment. She decided it was time to explore the locked room, to confront whatever shadows lay hidden behind its door. A sense of urgency surged within her as she recalled the eyewitness accounts that had resurfaced, whispers of strange noises and the flicker of lights emanating from that room on the night of the fire. With every visit to the old shelter, the stories grew more vivid, each one a thread weaving a tapestry of fear and uncertainty. She reached out to former shelter workers and residents, piecing together a timeline of events. What had happened in those critical hours? Days turned into weeks as Rosa pursued every lead, every piece of information. She scoured old news articles, seeking mentions of the shelter and its tragic history. The sense of community that once stood strong now seemed fractured, many too afraid to speak up, haunted by the memories of that night. Yet one name kept surfacing, a man who had been involved with the shelter in its final days. His presence lingered like a ghost, and those who mentioned him did so with a mixture of reverence and fear. As she dug deeper, she found that he had moved away shortly after the fire, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Rosa knew she had to find him. His silence might hold the key to unlocking the locked room's secrets. Armed with determination, she reached out through social media, tracking him down to a small town several hours away. Would he be willing to talk? Or would he, too, succumb to the weight of the past? The drive felt endless, each mile carrying her further into the unknown. As she drew closer, doubt crept in. What if he had buried the truth along with his memories? What if he refused to help her? Arriving at his home, she felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding as the seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a man aged by time and burdened by secrets. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously, his eyes narrowing as he sized her up. "Mr. Thompson?" Rosa replied, her voice steady. "I need to talk to you about the shelter fire. I believe you know more than you've let on." His expression shifted, the flicker of recognition darkening his features. "I don't want to talk about that," he said, attempting to close the door, but Rosa pressed forward. "The locked room," she urged, desperation creeping into her tone. "There's something hidden there, isn't there? Something that could change everything." He hesitated, the door ajar as shadows danced across his face. "You don't understand," he whispered, fear lacing his words. "Some things are better left buried." In that moment, the reality of her pursuit settled heavily on her shoulders. The truth was not just elusive, it was dangerous. But Rosa was not one to back down. The locked room was not just a location. It was a symbol of the darkness that had overshadowed her family for decades. She took a step closer, locking eyes with him. If you know something, you have to tell me. Lives depend on it. The air grew thick with tension, and as the weight of his silence hung between them, Rosa realized that the confrontation she had feared was no longer a choice. It was inevitable. The secrets of the past were clawing their way to the surface, and she was the only one who could bring them to light. But would she be prepared for the truth when it finally emerged? The man's expression faltered, a flicker of recognition washing over his features. It's not just a locked room, Rosa. It's a vault of memories, and some of those memories are nightmares. Rosa felt her heart race. What do you mean? He glanced over his shoulder, as if the walls themselves might betray him. Your sister wasn't who you think she was. There were things happening, things she was involved in that I couldn't understand. As the words hung in the air, Rosa's mind raced. What secrets lay buried beneath the surface? The image of her sister, the bright smile that had once filled their home, began to crack under the weight of these revelations. Tell me everything, Rosa demanded, her voice unwavering despite the storm of emotions brewing within. He took a deep breath, summoning courage from somewhere deep inside. It started with the people she associated with, not the ones you knew, but others. Darker, more dangerous. She was entangled in something far beyond us. Rosa felt a chill crawl up her spine. Her sister's disappearance was not merely a tragedy, it was a tangled web of deceit and danger. What was she involved in? She was part of a network, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. A group that dealt in illicit activities. I tried to keep her away, but she was drawn to it, Rosa. She thought she could control it. The truth began to sink in, heavy and suffocating. Her sister, a participant in a shadowy world. But why would she leave? Why not come to us for help? Because she was afraid, he replied, his eyes darting nervously. Afraid of what they might do if she tried to escape. They had their claws in deep, and she was terrified of the consequences of turning her back on them. Rosa's thoughts spiraled. The people in her sister's life, the ones she had never met, were now suspects in a mystery that had haunted her family for years. Where do I even begin to look? Start with her phone. There are messages, contacts, things she never deleted. They might lead you to the truth. But be careful, Rosa. You have no idea what you're stepping into. The gravity of his warning weighed heavily on her, yet a fierce determination ignited within. She had come too far to turn back now. Thank you, she said, the sincerity in her voice cutting through the tension. As she stepped away, a newfound sense of purpose propelled her forward. The locked room was no longer just a symbol. It was the key to unraveling the darkness that had consumed her sister's life. But as she ventured into the unknown, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. Someone was watching, lurking in the shadows of her investigation, ready to pounce if she uncovered too much. What if the very people her sister had feared were now watching her, waiting for the moment to strike? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but it also fueled her resolve. Rosa would not rest until she uncovered the truth, no matter how dangerous the path may be. The clock was ticking, and with every moment that passed, she felt her sister's presence urging her on. With the phone in hand, she began to sift through the messages, her heart pounding as she contemplated the web of lies that lay ahead. Each text, each name could be a potential lead, but they could also unleash a storm of chaos. But what could be worse than the agony of uncertainty? What could be more terrifying than not knowing if her sister was alive or gone forever? As she pressed deeper into the darkness, the lines between truth and deception began to blur. The answers she sought were closer than she realized, but so too were the shadows that threatened to engulf her. Rosa took a deep breath and steeled herself. She was ready to confront whatever awaited her. After all, the only way to find her sister was to face the demons that had taken her away. It was time to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in the shadows, and perhaps along the way, find the justice that had been long denied. Rosa began her investigation by reaching out to the contacts she had discovered in the messages. Each call brought a mix of hope and dread, as she navigated through layers of half-truths and evasions. Some were willing to speak, while others seemed guarded, almost fearful of the past. One name in particular stood out, a former resident of the shelter who had been living in the area during the fire. He had since moved away, but Rosa managed to track him down. When she finally connected with him, his voice trembled as he recounted that fateful night. "There were whispers," he said. "Things we weren't supposed to know. But I heard them. About what happened before the fire. About what was in that locked room." Rosa's heart raced. A locked room. It felt like a key to the answer she had been seeking. With renewed determination, she pressed him for more details. He spoke of strange noises, late-night visitors, and a sense of foreboding that hung over the shelter like a thick fog. As she continued to dig, Rosa discovered that several other former residents and workers had seen things that made them uneasy. Their testimonies hinted at illicit activities taking place behind the scenes, drug deals, secretive meetings, and even a shadowy figure who seemed to loom large over the shelter's operations. But as she spoke with more individuals, she sensed a reluctance to discuss the locked room. Some even warned her to drop the subject, insisting it was better left undisturbed. Their fears hung heavy in the air, and Rosa could feel the weight of their silence pressing down on her. Days turned into weeks, but she refused to back down. With each new lead, the web of deception only grew more intricate. The deeper she delved, the more connections she uncovered. People linked not only to the shelter, but also to a much larger network of crime that had thrived in the shadows of the city. Yet as Rosa pieced together the timeline of events, she began to suspect that the fire might not have been an accident. The locked room seemed to hold more than just remnants of a forgotten past. It hinted at a darker secret that someone was desperate to protect. With mounting urgency, she decided it was time to confront the authorities once again. This time, armed with the testimonies she had gathered, she approached them with renewed vigor. But the officers who had once dismissed her were now hesitant, their faces betraying a flicker of concern. "Rosa, you need to be careful," one of them warned. "Some things are better left buried." But for Rosa, burying the truth was not an option. She felt the lingering presence of her sister urging her forward, pushing her to keep asking questions, to keep digging. As she prepared for her next move, the realization struck her. The true danger lay not only in the shadows that surrounded her, but also in the very people she sought help from. The closer she got to the truth, the more perilous her journey became. With every step, the tension grew and the stakes escalated. Rosa was on the brink of uncovering something monumental, but she knew that the closer she got to the truth, the more she risked losing everything she had. The confrontation loomed ahead, the mystery of the locked room tantalizingly close. But would the revelation bring her peace or plunge her deeper into the darkness? The answer awaited her, just beyond the threshold. With each passing day, Rosa meticulously pieced together the fragments of her sister's life. The locked room had been sealed away for decades, but its existence sparked a fire within her that she could not extinguish. She revisited the shelter, now a hollow shell of its former self, and spoke to anyone willing to share their memories. "Do you remember anything unusual about that night?" she would ask. "Anything at all?" Most responses were mere shadows of recollection, whispers of a time long forgotten. But one man, a former resident, paused, his eyes clouded with memories. "There were stories, you know, about a secret room. Rumors of what went on behind those walls." Rosa's heart raced. The whispers had shifted from vague speculation to something more tangible. The man's words awakened echoes of fear. She pressed him for details, but he seemed hesitant, as if reliving the past was a burden he was not ready to bear. "People don't talk about it for a reason," he warned. "Sometimes it's best to leave things alone." But for Rosa, leaving things alone was no longer an option. She scoured old newspapers, poring over articles detailing the fire and its aftermath. Each headline, each line of text, became a thread leading her deeper into a web of secrets. A photo caught her eye, a grainy image of the shelter just days before the fire. In the background, something flickered in the shadows, a figure that seemed out of place. As she enlarged the image, she felt a chill run down her spine. The figure looked eerily familiar, and suddenly a name surfaced in her mind, a name she had heard whispered in hushed tones during her investigation. It belonged to someone powerful in the community, someone who had been a frequent visitor to the shelter. Could it be that this individual had ties to her sister's disappearance? The thought sent her heart racing. Rosa's determination intensified. She reached out to a local historian, someone who had cataloged the shelter's history. "What can you tell me about this person?" she asked, laying the photograph on the table between them. The historian studied the image, his brow furrowing. They had a reputation, a dark one. There were always rumors, but nothing ever proven. Rosa felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was the twist she had feared. Was it possible that those in positions of authority had turned a blind eye to something sinister? With newfound purpose, she began to dig deeper, unearthing old records and speaking with former employees. Many were reluctant to share, their faces etched with the weight of untold stories. But with each encounter, Rosa sensed the tension in the air, a collective fear of what might surface if the past was unearthed. Late one night, as she pored over documents, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if the locked room had not just hidden secrets, but also harbored danger? The more she learned, the clearer it became that the truth was darker than she had ever imagined. Rosa was closing in on something monumental, yet with every answer the shadows grew longer, the path ahead more fraught with peril. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the threat of those who wanted the past to remain buried looming ever larger. The confrontation was now inevitable, but Rosa was determined to face whatever came next. As she prepared for the next step in her investigation, one thought echoed in her mind. The truth was out there, and she was ready to uncover it, no matter the cost. Rosa knew she had to act quickly. The whispers of fear from former employees haunted her thoughts, and she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Armed with a growing collection of documents and testimonies, she decided to revisit the site of the burned shelter. Standing before its charred remains, Rosa felt an unsettling connection to the past, a past that was steeped in tragedy and obscured by silence. She recalled the locked room, a tangible reminder of the secrets that lurked just beneath the surface. Her heart raced as she imagined what might have been hidden behind those doors, what stories had remained unspoken for far too long. With each visit, she felt an unseen presence urging her forward, compelling her to seek the truth no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and her relentless pursuit began to draw attention. Some were supportive, while others warned her to stop. A particularly unsettling encounter occurred when she met a former firefighter who had responded to the blaze that fateful night. His eyes were clouded with memories, and he spoke in hushed tones, as if the very act of recounting his experience could summon the horrors of the past. "Rosa, there were things we saw that night, things we were told to forget. You're playing with fire," he cautioned, his voice shaking. Some things should stay buried. But Rosa's resolve only deepened. She needed to know what had happened to those who had vanished, and why the locked room had remained untouched for so long. The tension surrounding her investigation began to mount. She could feel the scrutiny of unseen watchers, their presence tightening like a noose around her. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of research, Rosa received an anonymous tip. A cryptic message arrived in her inbox, accompanied by a grainy photograph of a familiar face, a man who had been closely associated with the shelter and had mysteriously vanished in the aftermath of the fire. The note read simply, "Look closer. Everything connects." As she stared at the photograph, a chill ran down her spine. She had seen this man's name in her documents, but it was the details surrounding his disappearance that now demanded her attention. What had he known? Why had he disappeared? And how did he connect to the locked room and the secrets it held? With a newfound determination, Rosa began to retrace his steps, piecing together a timeline that now seemed more intricate than she had ever imagined. Each revelation only deepened the mystery, weaving a web of lies and betrayal that stretched far beyond the walls of the shelter. But as she delved deeper into the shadows, Rosa sensed that someone was watching her. The feeling was palpable, a cold breath on the back of her neck that warned her of impending danger. This investigation was no longer just about uncovering the past. It was becoming a perilous journey into a dark world that wanted to remain hidden. With every lead she followed, every door she knocked on, the stakes grew higher. Rosa was no longer simply a grieving daughter. She was a woman on the brink of uncovering a truth that could change everything. But with each step closer to the answers, the threat of those who wished to keep the past buried loomed larger than ever. And soon, the moment of confrontation would arrive. She could feel it in her bones, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The next chapter of her investigation promised to reveal not just the secrets of that locked room, but the dark reality of who was truly responsible for the horrors that had unfolded so many years ago. Rosa gathered her courage and pushed forward, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The locked room behind the kitchen had become her obsession, a tangible reminder of the past that begged to be opened. Armed with the knowledge of her mother's connection to the shelter and the whispers of the past, she sought out anyone who might hold a key, figuratively and literally, to this enigma. She revisited the surviving witnesses, the ones who had lived through the chaos of that fateful night in 1979. Their memories were fragmented, like shattered glass, but each shard offered a glimpse into what had been. Some were too afraid to talk, their faces haunted by the memories they wished to forget. Others were eager to share, their voices trembling with the weight of long-buried secrets. Through these conversations, Rosa began to piece together a troubling narrative. There were rumors of illicit activities occurring at the shelter, whispers of stolen goods and debts that went unpaid. The shelter had once served as a refuge, but beneath its facade lurked a darker purpose, a cover for something far more sinister. Rosa's heart raced as she realized that her mother might have been more than just a victim. She could have been entangled in a web of corruption that threatened to ensnare anyone who dared to cross it. As she pursued these leads, she stumbled upon a name that sent chills down her spine. A former employee of the shelter known for his questionable ties to the criminal underworld. Rosa's instincts screamed at her to be cautious, but she knew she had to confront him. This could be the breakthrough she desperately needed, the key to unlocking the truth behind her mother's disappearance. Days turned into nights as Rosa tracked him down, following a trail of whispers through back alleys and dimly lit bars. The air grew thick with tension, and with each step, she felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Her pulse quickened as she approached the bar where he was rumored to frequent, a place where secrets were traded like currency. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with the smell of smoke and regret. She scanned the room, her heart pounding in her chest as she spotted him, a man with a hardened face and a gaze that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Rosa steeled herself and approached, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Can we talk?" she asked, her words cutting through the noise like a knife. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, time stood still. Rosa could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Would he deny her, dismiss her as just another curious onlooker? Or would he reveal the secrets that could shatter the silence that had enveloped her family for decades? As he leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth twisted into a smirk. Rosa knew she was on the precipice of something monumental. The truth was close, but it was clear that she was not the only one seeking answers. The atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension crackling like static electricity, foretelling the storm that was about to break. What Rosa didn't yet realize was that the answers she sought came with a price, one that could put her life in jeopardy. Little did she know, the confrontation she was about to initiate would uncover not just the dark past of the shelter, but an intricate web of deceit that had ensnared those she loved most. The truth was waiting, lurking just beneath the surface, but revealing it would mean confronting the very people who had the most to lose. As she prepared to face the man who held the key to her mother's fate, Rosa felt the walls closing in. The time for answers was near, but the shadows of the past were ready to fight back. Rosa stood in front of the mirror, taking a moment to steady herself. The weight of her mother's unsolved disappearance pressed heavily on her chest. She remembered the nights filled with unanswered questions and the hollow ache of loss that had shaped her life. Today, she would confront the man who might hold the answers, a man whose presence made her skin crawl. As she approached the small cafe where their meeting was set, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The cafe was bustling with activity, but for Rosa, it felt eerily quiet, as if the world around her had faded into the background. She spotted him at a corner table, a figure she had seen only in old photographs, the man who had once been a resident of the shelter, now a shadow of his former self. The exchange began with cautious pleasantries, but as they sat across from each other, Rosa's resolve hardened. She broached the subject of the locked room behind the kitchen, carefully observing his reaction. The flicker of recognition in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He was familiar with the room's secrets. With each question she posed, Rosa felt the tension mount. He deflected, sidestepping her inquiries with practiced ease, but the cracks in his facade began to show. She pressed harder, revealing the new evidence, the documents, the photographs, and the whispers of the past that had led her here. The man's demeanor shifted, unease creeping into his voice as he denied any knowledge of what had transpired in that room. Rosa sensed the truth lurking just beneath the surface, hidden behind layers of deceit. As the conversation escalated, it became clear that the man was not merely a witness. He was a participant in the dark events that had unfolded in the shelter all those years ago. The air crackled with tension as Rosa confronted him with what she had uncovered, her heart racing with the realization that she was perilously close to exposing the secrets that had been buried for decades. But just as the truth seemed within her grasp, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You have no idea what you're getting into, do you?" The warning hung in the air, heavy with menace. Rosa's pulse quickened. She had come too far to back down now. But the fear that gripped her was undeniable. What had begun as a search for her mother had spiraled into something far more dangerous. The intricate web of deceit was tightening around her, and with each passing moment she could feel the noose drawing closer. What awaited her on the other side of this confrontation? Would she uncover the truth? Or would she become another victim of the very darkness she was trying to expose? The answers were tantalizingly close, yet shrouded in peril. Rosa knew she had to proceed with caution, but the urgency of her quest burned within her. As she prepared to dig deeper into the man's past, one thing became painfully clear. This was not just about uncovering a family secret. It was about survival. The darkness was alive, and it would stop at nothing to keep its secrets buried. In the days that followed, Rosa's determination became a beacon of hope amidst the despair that had clouded her life for so long. She meticulously pieced together the fragments of her mother's story, revealing a narrative woven with betrayal and hidden truths. As she confronted the key players in this dark saga, the facade began to crumble. The man who had issued his chilling warning turned out to be a pivotal figure in a web of corruption that extended far beyond her family's tragedy. In a tense confrontation, Rosa presented her findings, exposing not only his involvement but also the collusion of others who had long been thought innocent. The truth, as painful as it was, shone a light into the darkest corners of the case, revealing a conspiracy that had silenced her mother for decades. With the evidence mounting, authorities were compelled to take notice. What once seemed a cold case was now heating up, as law enforcement reopened investigations with renewed vigor. The courage Rosa displayed in facing her fears inspired a community that had long been overshadowed by the shadows of doubt and loss. Finally, justice was served. The culprits were held accountable, their actions laid bare for all to see. Rosa's tireless pursuit of the truth had not only shed light on her mother's fate, but had also exposed a deeper societal issue of negligence and complicity that allowed such injustices to fester. As she stood in the courtroom, watching the guilty parties face the consequences of their actions, a mix of relief and sorrow washed over her. Justice had been served, but at a profound cost. The scars of loss would never fully heal, yet Rosa found solace in knowing that her mother's story would no longer be silenced. This journey of discovery, filled with peril and heartache, underscored the resilience of the human spirit. It was a testament to the power of truth and the lengths one will go to seek justice for a loved one. Rosa had not just uncovered a mystery, she had reclaimed her narrative, transforming grief into strength. As we reflect on Rosa's journey, we are reminded of the importance of pursuing truth, no matter how daunting the path may seem. The echoes of loss can be a heavy burden, but they can also ignite a relentless quest for justice. In the end, it is the pursuit of truth that binds us to our loved ones, illuminating the shadows where silence once reigned. What secrets lie buried in your own story, waiting to be uncovered?